Welcome to our channel. Whether you're a long-time Bible reader or just starting, there's always something new in the scriptures. Today, we're exploring a question many have overlooked: what really happened between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. Genesis begins, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." But in the very next verse, the earth is described as formless and empty, with darkness covering the deep, and the Spirit of God hovering over the waters. If God's creation was perfect, why does it start this way? Some believe this verse marks the beginning of creation, while others think it reveals something deeper, a catastrophic event, perhaps a cosmic battle, that caused the earth to fall into chaos before God began his restoration. This is where the mystery unfolds. Genesis 1:1 speaks of a perfect creation, but Genesis 1:2 shows a world in disorder. For years, theologians have debated why this shift occurs. Some see it as a time of destruction, others as a period before God's restoration began. Today, we are going to dive into what happened between these two verses. Was the earth truly chaotic from the beginning, or did something catastrophic cause it to be formless and empty? And how does humanity fit into all of this? By the end of this video, you'll have a deeper understanding of Genesis 1:1-2 and its role in the Bible's bigger narrative. We'll uncover spiritual truths, the fall of Lucifer, and the cosmic battle that shaped the world we know today. Before we start, thank you for joining us. If you're new, welcome. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And for returning viewers, thank you for your continued support. Leave your thoughts and questions in the comments. We love hearing from you. Let's dive into the mystery of Genesis 1:2 and explore God's original design for the universe. Stay with us as we uncover one of the greatest cosmic battles in history, the battle that began before the world even existed. Are you ready? Let's go. Firstly, the gap theory, a pre-Adam world. Genesis 1:2 has long sparked debate and curiosity among theologians, Bible readers alike. The verse states, "Now the earth was formless and empty, darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters." This passage paints a picture of a chaotic and desolate world, raising questions about how a perfect and orderly God could have created such a state. Was this the beginning of everything, or was there something more before it? One possible explanation is the gap theory, which suggests that there was a significant time gap between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, a period not explicitly mentioned in the Bible but inferred from other scriptures. According to this theory, the earth was initially created in a perfect, ordered state, but something catastrophic occurred: a rebellion, a divine judgment, or a cosmic event that left the world in a desolate state described in Genesis 1:2. This implies that Genesis 1:2 represents not the beginning of creation but the restoration of a previously existing world. The Hebrew words used in Genesis 1:2, tohu, formless, and bohu, empty, carry much more weight than their English translations might suggest. Tohu refers to desolation, confusion, and wasteland, often tied to divine judgment. Bohu, on the other hand, means emptiness, or void, a lack of life. Together, these terms imply that the earth was not just unformed, but ravaged and ruined. It suggests that the world was left in a state of disorder, not just raw and undeveloped, but thoroughly broken. If Genesis 1:2 were the beginning of creation, the terms formless and empty might not be used. Instead, we'd expect to see words that indicate an earth simply in its raw form, ready for God's creative work. The use of these specific terms suggests that something significant had already occurred before Genesis 1:2, leaving the earth in this ruined condition. This forms the basis of the gap theory. The gap theory proposes that there was a pre-Adamic world, a time before Adam and Eve, which is not fully described in the Bible. While this era is not explicitly detailed, it's hinted at in various passages. The theory suggests that the earth once existed in a perfect state, possibly inhabited by spiritual beings, such as angels, or other life forms. However, something dramatic happened, likely a rebellion or divine judgment that resulted in the earth's ruin. Therefore, Genesis 1:2 marks not the beginning of creation, but the beginning of restoration. If we accept the existence of a pre-Adamic era, it raises the question of what that world was like. Some proponents of the gap theory suggest that the earth was inhabited by spiritual beings, possibly angels, or celestial entities. In Job 38:4-7, God asks Job, "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation, while the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy?" The term sons of God is often interpreted as angels, implying that spiritual beings existed during the earth's early formation. If these beings were on earth, they might have had dominion over it, possibly ruling or caring for it in some way. However, something caused the world to fall into chaos, resulting in a disorder described in Genesis 1:2. Central to the gap theory is the idea that the earth's chaos was the result of Lucifer's rebellion. In Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, we learn of Lucifer's pride and his desire to elevate himself above God. In Isaiah 14:13-14, Lucifer declares, "I will ascend to the heavens, I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will make myself like the Most High." This pride led to his fall and expulsion from heaven, an event that could have caused the earth's devastation. Lucifer's rebellion affected not only the spiritual realm but also the physical world, resulting in the earth being left formless, empty, and dark, as described in Genesis 1:2. Given the earth's state in Genesis 1:2, it's clear that God was not starting from scratch. Instead, he was engaged in a process of restoration, bringing order to a world that had been ruined. Genesis 1:2 marks the beginning of this restoration. The earth was not created in this chaotic, dark state, it had been devastated, and God was preparing it for the creation of life and the fulfillment of his divine plan for humanity. When God declares in Genesis 1:3, "Let there be light," it is not just the beginning of the physical universe. It marks the start of reconstruction, the divine presence bringing light to a world that was previously consumed by darkness. This interpretation fits with the biblical portrayal of God as a redeemer, constantly restoring what has been broken, healing what has been damaged, and transforming ruins into something new and beautiful. If the earth had been created in a perfect state but was later ruined and needed restoration, what role did humanity play in this larger story? According to the gap theory, the creation of Adam and Eve marks the start of a new phase in God's restoration plan. Humanity was not merely placed on a newly created earth but was given the responsibility to continue the restoration process, beginning with the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve were given dominion over the earth and tasked with cultivating and protecting it. However, the fall of man in Genesis 3 shows that this task was not easy. The serpent, the embodiment of Lucifer, was already present in the garden, working to corrupt God's creation. The Garden of Eden was not a paradise untouched by conflict, it was a battleground, with the serpent representing ancient forces of darkness that sought to undermine God's plan. The gap theory offers a deeper view of God's nature by portraying him as a restorer and redeemer, always working to bring life and order to a world that has been marred by destruction. From the very beginning, God's intention was not just to create, but to restore what had been lost, whether that was the earth itself or humanity's relationship with him. This perspective highlights the cosmic scale of God's plan. The events of Genesis 1:2 and the restoration that follows are not merely about the creation of our world, they are part of a larger cosmic story. The spiritual rebellion of Lucifer, the destruction of the earth, and the creation of humanity are all interconnected in a grand narrative that reveals God's ultimate plan for redemption. The gap theory is not universally accepted, but it does have support from both theological and scientific perspectives. The idea that the earth was once perfect but was later destroyed fits with a biblical narrative and with geological evidence of ancient catastrophic events. Fossil records and the existence of megalithic structures suggest that there may have been a pre-human era on Earth, which aligns with the theory that something catastrophic occurred between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. Moreover, the gap theory does not conflict with scientific findings about the Earth's age. Many scholars believe that science and faith can coexist and that remnants of an earlier creation may be detected through archaeology and other scientific methods. The gap theory offers an intriguing perspective on the biblical creation narrative. By suggesting a pre-Adamic world and interpreting Genesis 1:2 as the aftermath of a cosmic event, it provides a deeper understanding of God's work in the world. God did not simply create the world, he restored it, bringing light into the darkness and order into the chaos. This theory emphasizes that God's plan for the earth and humanity has always been one of restoration. Just as He transformed the ruined earth into a world full of life, He continues to restore and redeem us. The creation of Adam was not the beginning of all things but the beginning of God's plan to restore the earth and establish humanity as part of His divine purpose. The story of creation is not just a simple narrative of beginnings. It is the story of restoration, of light overcoming darkness, of rebellion and redemption, and of God's eternal power to heal what was broken and bring life from the ruins. Through this lens, the creation of Adam becomes not only a new beginning but a divine response to the chaos that preceded it. Second part. The fall of Lucifer and the spiritual battle. Humanity was not placed in a neutral environment. From the start, we were thrust into a world already marked by a cosmic spiritual battle. The choices we make hold far more significance than we often realize, as they impact not just the physical world but resonate deeply in the spiritual realm. Our lives are part of a larger divine narrative, one of redemption and restoration. Before humanity was created, the heavenly realms were already in turmoil. In Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, we get a glimpse of Lucifer's fall, a once exalted angel who became consumed by pride and ambition, seeking to surpass God's authority. His rebellion didn't just shake the spiritual realm but also affected the earth. Lucifer's desire to elevate himself above God triggered a cosmic war, the consequences of which reached far beyond the heavens. Lucifer, once perfect and majestic, became fixated on his own greatness. His ambition led him to attempt to usurp God, which resulted in his fall. This rebellion had immediate consequences for the heavenly hosts, dividing angels into factions. Some remained loyal to God, while others followed Lucifer. This division set the stage for the spiritual battle that would play out on earth and involve humanity. The battle wasn't only fought in the heavens, it reached down to the earth. When Adam and Eve were placed in the Garden of Eden, they were not just tending a garden, they were standing in the middle of this ongoing spiritual struggle. The serpent in the garden was not just a random animal, it was the embodiment of Satan, already cast out of heaven. Satan's mission was clear: to corrupt God's creation, to sow doubt and rebellion, and to lead humanity away from God. Satan's presence in the garden wasn't accidental. He had been there long before Adam and Eve arrived, already laying the groundwork for his deception. His primary goal wasn't just to introduce chaos into the physical world but to disrupt the relationship between humanity and God. When the serpent first spoke to Eve, questioning God's command with "Did God really say?" it wasn't an innocent inquiry, it was a direct attack on God's word and his character. Satan wanted to make Eve doubt God's goodness, implying that God was withholding something good from them. This tactic of questioning God's goodness is still a primary strategy of the enemy today. Satan didn't immediately oppose God outright. Instead, he wanted to get Adam and Eve to question God's motives. If he could get them to doubt God's goodness, they would be more likely to rebel. This deception has been effective throughout history, as the enemy continues to make us doubt God's character, drawing us away from trust and obedience. The temptation Adam and Eve faced wasn't just about eating fruit. It was about who they would trust. Would they trust the Creator who had provided them with everything, or would they trust the serpent who was questioning God's intentions? The serpent offered an alternative reality, suggesting that they could be like God, independent of his authority. The choice was clear: God's kingdom, where trust and life reigned, or Satan's kingdom, where deception and rebellion thrived. When Adam and Eve chose to eat the fruit, they made a spiritual declaration. They aligned themselves with Satan's rebellion, allowing his lies to take root. This decision didn't just violate a rule, it opened the door for sin and brokenness to enter creation, affecting not only them but all of humanity. The consequences of their choice echo through history, shaping the world we live in today. The choices Adam and Eve made in the garden set the stage for the ongoing spiritual battle we are part of today. Humanity was created with the ability to choose between good and evil, and our choices still carry spiritual weight. Every day, we face decisions that reflect this ongoing battle. Ephesians 6:12 reminds us that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces of evil. Our battle is spiritual, and our decisions have lasting consequences. Just as Adam and Eve's choice changed the course of history, Our choices today shape our lives and the world around us. We are called to stand firm in our faith, resist the lies of the enemy, and live in the authority God has given us. Our role in this spiritual battle is not passive. We must choose to live according to God's will and stand against the forces that seek to undermine it. Humanity was given authority from the beginning. In Genesis 1:28, God commanded Adam and Eve to fill the earth, subdue it, and have dominion over every living thing. This was not just a command to manage the earth but an invitation to join in God's divine plan. Humanity was entrusted with the responsibility of ruling the earth in alignment with God's will, reflecting His authority. However, when Adam and Eve sinned, they relinquished that authority to Satan. In Luke 4:6, Satan boasts that the kingdoms of the world were given to him, reflecting how humanity's rebellion allowed Satan to gain dominion over the earth. But through Jesus Christ, this authority has been restored. Jesus' life, death, and resurrection reclaimed the dominion humanity lost. In Matthew 28:18, Jesus declares that all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to him. Through Christ, humanity is once again invited to walk in the authority God originally intended. As believers, we are not passive bystanders in this spiritual battle, we are active participants in God's redemptive work. As followers of Christ, we are called to be warriors of light, actively resisting the forces of darkness. Every choice we make has eternal significance. The spiritual battle is ongoing, and we must choose to live according to God's will, standing firm in our faith and using the authority Christ has given us. Satan continues to use the same tactics as he did in the garden: deception, temptation, and manipulation. He wants to make us doubt God's goodness, distract us from our true purpose, and lead us into sin. But we are not defenseless. God has equipped us with the armor of God, as described in Ephesians 6:10-18, to stand firm against the enemy's attacks. The victory has already been secured through Jesus Christ. Our role is to walk in that authority, standing firm in our faith and resisting temptation. We are active participants in God's kingdom, not passive observers. Humanity was created with a divine purpose, to take part in the spiritual battle for the earth. From the beginning, we've been engaged in a cosmic war between good and evil, a war that continues today. But the victory belongs to God. Through Jesus Christ, we've been given the authority to stand firm, resist temptation, and walk in the victory He has secured for us. Our role in this battle is to remain faithful, trust in God's restorative power, and live in the light of His truth. The third, the role of humanity in the spiritual battle. Humanity was never created in a neutral or peaceful environment. From the very beginning, we were placed into a world already marked by a spiritual battle that had been unfolding long before Adam and Eve took their first steps in the Garden of Eden. The choices we make carry more weight than we realize. They don't just affect the physical world but also reverberate in the spiritual realm. Our lives are part of a greater story of redemption, and we play an active role in it. Before humanity even existed, the heavenly realms were already in turmoil. In Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, we are introduced to Lucifer, once a beautiful and exalted angel, who became prideful and sought to usurp God's authority. This rebellion led to a spiritual war with consequences that extended beyond heaven and impacted the earth as well. Lucifer's desire to elevate himself above God set the stage for the battle that humanity would soon be caught in. Lucifer's rebellion didn't just disrupt the spiritual world, it had a ripple effect on the physical world too. As a once perfect archangel, he became consumed by ambition and pride. His ambition was to take God's place and assert his own sovereignty, which led to his expulsion from heaven. His pride opened the door for evil to enter creation, which would lead to humanity's involvement in this ongoing spiritual battle. When Adam and Eve were placed in the Garden of Eden, they weren't merely tending to a garden. They were standing in the middle of a cosmic spiritual conflict. The serpent in the garden wasn't just a random animal, it was Satan himself, already cast out of heaven. His mission was clear: to corrupt God's creation, to twist the perfection that God had made, and to lead humanity into rebellion. Satan's presence in the garden was no accident. He had been there long before humanity arrived, already beginning his campaign to deceive and corrupt. His aim wasn't merely to cause physical chaos, but to break the relationship between humanity and God. When the serpent first spoke to Eve in Genesis 3, asking, "Did God really say, 'You must not eat from any tree in the garden'?" It wasn't an innocent question. It was a direct attack on God's word and character. By casting doubt on God's command, Satan was trying to distort Eve's perception of God's goodness and intentions. Satan's strategy wasn't to directly oppose God at first. His tactic was to get humanity to question God's goodness. If he could get Adam and Eve to doubt God's motives, they would be more likely to rebel. This tactic has been effective throughout history by making us doubt God's character. Satan aims to lead us astray and separate us from the truth. The temptation in Eden was far deeper than simply eating fruit. It was about whom humanity would trust. Would they trust God, who had created them and provided for them, or would they trust the serpent, who questioned God's intentions? Satan offered an alternative reality, one where humanity could be like God, independent of his authority. The choice Adam and Eve faced was between two kingdoms: God's kingdom, where trust, obedience, and life existed, and Satan's kingdom, where deception, rebellion, and death reigned. By choosing to eat the fruit, Adam and Eve made a spiritual declaration. They sided with Satan in the battle and allowed his deception to take root. Their disobedience gave Satan a foothold in creation, which set into motion the consequences that would affect all of humanity, the earth, and the course of history. The ripple effects of this decision continue to impact the world today. The decisions made in the Garden of Eden laid the foundation for the ongoing spiritual battle we face today. Humanity was created in God's image with the ability to choose between good and evil, and our choices continue to carry spiritual significance. In Ephesians 6:12, we are reminded that our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. The spiritual battle is ongoing, and our decisions play a role in that. Just as Adam and Eve's decision changed the course of human history, the choices we make today still impact our lives and the world around us. We are called to stand firm in our faith, resist the lies of the enemy, and walk in the authority God has given us. Our role in the spiritual battle is not passive. We must actively choose to live according to God's will and stand against the forces that seek to undermine it. From the beginning, humanity was given authority by God to rule and reign over the earth. In Genesis 1:28, God commands Adam and Eve to fill the earth, subdue it, and have dominion over every living thing. This wasn't just a call to manage the earth, it was an invitation to join in God's divine plan. Humanity was given authority to rule the earth, reflecting God's reign. However, when Adam and Eve sinned, they relinquished this authority to Satan. In Luke 4:6, Satan claims the authority over the kingdoms of the earth, a result of humanity's rebellion. But through Jesus Christ, this authority has been reclaimed. Jesus' life, death, and resurrection restored the dominion humanity lost in the garden. In Matthew 28:18, Jesus declares, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me." Through Christ, humanity is invited once again to walk in the authority God originally intended for us. As believers, we are not passive bystanders in this spiritual battle, we are active participants in God's redemptive plan. Our role in the spiritual battle is clear: we are called to be warriors of light. The choices we make are crucial, as each decision we make has eternal significance. The battle is far from over, it continues each day as we choose to live according to God's will or give in to the lies of the enemy. Satan still uses the same tactics he used in the garden: deception, temptation, and manipulation. He seeks to make us doubt God's goodness and distract us from our true purpose. But we are not defenseless. God has equipped us with the armor of God, as described in Ephesians 6:10-18, to stand firm against the enemy's attacks. The victory has already been won through Jesus Christ. Our role is to walk in that authority and stand firm in our faith. We are not passive spectators, we are active participants in God's kingdom. Our mission is to resist temptation, stand in the light of Christ, and walk in the victory He has secured for us. Humanity was created for a divine purpose: to participate in the spiritual battle for the earth. From the very beginning, we've been engaged in a cosmic war between good and evil, a war that continues today. But the victory belongs to God. Through Jesus Christ, we have been given the authority to stand firm, resist temptation, and walk in the victory He has secured for us. Our role in this battle is to remain faithful, trust in God's restorative power, and live in the light of His truth. Final, the promise of redemption. The silence between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2 might initially seem puzzling, but it holds deep significance about God's character. These verses introduce us to more than just the formless and empty state of the earth. They invite us into a grander narrative, one that stretches across time and history. This story reveals a crucial truth about God: He is a restorer. Where there is darkness, He brings light. Where there is chaos, He brings order. And where there is death, He promises new life. In Genesis 1:1, we encounter the creation of the heavens and the earth, but in Genesis 1:2, we are confronted with a desolate, chaotic world. This moment is not a result of divine failure but a reflection of the cosmic battle already underway. It is in this context that God begins His work of restoration. As the narrative continues, where God separates light from darkness and brings order to chaos, we see God not just as a creator, but as a restorer, transforming what was once chaotic into a world full of life, purpose, and beauty. However, this isn't simply a story about the physical world. The restoration in Genesis 1 is a metaphor for God's overarching plan of redemption, one that stretches from the creation of the universe to the eventual redemption of humanity. Just as God brought order to the chaos in the beginning, He promises to bring order to the chaos in our lives, healing our brokenness, and leading us out of darkness. The creation account, especially in Genesis 1:2, hints at a deeper cosmic conflict. Lucifer's rebellion and the fall of the heavenly realms created a spiritual disorder that reached into the very fabric of creation. The earth wasn't ruined because of divine imperfection, but because it had been marred by evil. And yet, when everything seemed lost, God didn't abandon His creation. He began His work of restoration, showing that His plan has always been to redeem what was lost. This theme of redemption extends beyond just the physical world. It reaches into every human heart. The formless and empty earth mirrors the condition of our hearts before we encounter God's redemptive power. Just as God spoke light into creation, He speaks light into our lives today, offering us the chance to step out of darkness into His marvelous light. The promise of redemption is not just a theological concept, it is something that we can experience in our own lives. No matter what darkness we face, God's light is still shining. His restorative power is available right now, ready to transform our situations. Life is full of moments where we face confusion, hardship, and loss, which can feel like the darkness described in Genesis 1:2. But just as God called forth light in the midst of that darkness, He calls forth light in our lives today. In times of despair, He offers hope. In struggles, He offers peace. In our weaknesses, He offers strength. The process of redemption is an ongoing journey. God didn't stop with creation, He continues to make all things new. No matter how broken you feel, God's promise of restoration is still at work. Whether it's healing from past wounds, finding peace amidst chaos, or restoring relationships, God is actively working to bring light into our lives. The ultimate act of restoration, of course, is found in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. In Genesis, we see God's creative power bringing light into darkness. But it is in Jesus that the ultimate light entered the world, bringing salvation, healing, and eternal life. Jesus' sacrifice on the cross not only defeated the darkness of sin and death, but it also restored humanity's relationship with God. Through His resurrection, He brought victory over darkness and offered new life to all who believe. In Jesus, the ultimate promise of restoration is realized. Through Him, we experience forgiveness, healing, and transformation. The work God began in Genesis continues in Jesus Christ, who makes all things new. No matter where you are in life, Jesus offers the ultimate restoration, the opportunity to start fresh, to be made whole, and to walk in the light of His love. The story of restoration does not end with Jesus' work on the cross. It is an ongoing process, and we are invited to participate in it. God's work of restoration is not just something He does for us, but something we are called to join in. Just as God restored the earth, He invites us to be part of His redemptive plan. As followers of Christ, We are called to reflect God's light in the world and share His message of restoration with others. As we walk through life, we are meant to be instruments of God's restoration. Whether through our actions, words, or love, we are called to bring light to the darkness around us. Every choice we make, every act of kindness, every moment of grace, is a part of God's larger plan to redeem and restore the world. Embracing God's restoration means surrendering ourselves to His transformative work. Just as the earth had to be prepared to receive God's light and order, we must open our hearts to His work in our lives. Even when the path seems unclear or difficult, we can trust that God is leading us to something greater. The restoration He offers is not just about returning to a former state, but about becoming whole in a new and profound way. The ultimate act of restoration is found in Jesus Christ. Through Him, the full restoration of all things is made possible. Jesus is the light that came into the world, overcoming the darkness caused by sin. As God spoke light into the formless earth, He speaks light into our hearts through Christ, offering us the hope of complete restoration. His sacrifice on the cross was the final act of restoration, and through Him, we can experience redemption, healing, and renewal. As we reflect on the incredible promise of redemption, it's important to remember that God's restoration is available to each and every one of us. The darkness in our lives doesn't define us. The chaos doesn't have the final word. God is in the business of turning chaos into beauty, brokenness into wholeness, and death into life. And the best part is that this restoration is not a one-time event, it's an ongoing journey that continues throughout our lives. God's redemptive work began in Genesis, was fulfilled in Jesus Christ, and will be completed when He returns to establish His kingdom. Until then, we live in the hope of restoration, knowing that the victory has already been won. The ultimate promise of redemption is not just for the future, but for now. Whatever you may be facing, remember that God's light is shining into your life today. Let it transform your heart and your world. As we conclude this reflection on God's promise of redemption, I encourage you to consider the areas in your life that need restoration. Is there darkness you're facing? Chaos you're experiencing? Brokenness in your relationships or your heart? Remember, God's restorative power is available to you right now. Let His light shine into your life and bring the transformation you need. If you've been touched by this message, I'd love to hear your thoughts and stories. Share your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more content that explores God's amazing plan of redemption and restoration. Let's walk together in the light of His love and embrace His promise of restoration for our lives. Video description. In today's video, we're diving into one of the most fascinating and often overlooked mysteries in the Bible: what happened between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. This seemingly small gap holds profound significance in understanding the grand narrative of creation, fall, and restoration. Join us as we explore the pre-creation mystery and uncover the deeper spiritual truths hidden between these verses. Is there more to the story of God's creation than we've been told? Did something catastrophic happen before God began the process of restoring the world? We'll also delve into the gap theory, Lucifer's rebellion, and how humanity fits into this cosmic battle that began long before our existence. By the end of this video, you'll have a clearer understanding of Genesis 1:1-2 and how it fits into the larger biblical story of creation and redemption. Whether you're a long-time Bible reader or just beginning your journey, there's always something new to learn. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated on more biblical wisdom and mysteries. Speech Balloon, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. Leave a comment below, share your insights, and let's start a meaningful discussion.